I love the waddle. I love the
Yep,
penguin
the penguin
waddle.
waddle.
Welcome to the Weekly Fix podcast, where we're just two friends talking about our passions within movies, TV shows, gaming, and comics. Thanks for checking out the podcast. We hope you like it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special episode of Weekly Fix. My name is Jacob, and joining me, as always, is Zane. And guys, this is such a special episode because this is actually our 1 year anniversary episode. Now, I don't believe it's 1 year to the day because it's just the way the days fall, but this is technically our 1 year anniversary of doing the podcast, which is super exciting. And before we get into anything, I do just want to take a quick second to thank you all so much for those of you that have been along for the journey. I know we have had a lot of people that have watched probably every episode, which is really, really cool that some of you have taken the time out of your weeks to do that. So before we get into, we're going to be saying thank you a lot throughout the episode. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a thanks. And I know Zane feels the same way, but that's super exciting. And we're going to have lots to talk about with our 1 year anniversary. And we're actually going to be debuting a new segment on the podcast that has been in the works for a little while that is super exciting. But before we get into any of that fun stuff, before we get into any breakdowns and other stuff we're going to be talking about throughout this episode of the podcast, Zane, how are you doing? And can you believe it has been a year already?
I can't believe it. I was trying to actually track it, and I was like, man, it can't be this month because was not thinking that we were there yet. I kept thinking that we started like closer to December, but yeah, crazy that it's been a full year. It does not seem like that, but I mean, I actually kind of like even just going back. So last week, I pulled through the archives and found that little clip to put in last week's episode, and just kind of to listen to our sound quality and kind of talking through some of the episodes. I feel the growth in what we're producing, and I hope you as an audience does as well. That we're growing, that we're getting better, and that we're improving. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's been a year, but I mean, of course, now my son is over 14 months old now, and it's just absolutely insane that it's been a year. It seems
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, especially when you start thinking about it like that, when you talk about your son being that, like it really does put into perspective how time goes by. Like it really does not feel like it's been a year. And just all the things that have happened in the year, not only has the podcast been going and it's feel like it's been successful because I feel the same way as you. I feel like we've made some great strides and we've really learned how to talk on here and we've really gotten, kind of an algorithm, not algorithm, maybe like a diagram down for how we want to do things. And we've got such good ideas moving forward. But it's funny just to kind of look back. Earlier this week, I actually went back to our very first episode just to kind of, I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I watched for probably, or listened to about 15 minutes of it. And man, things have changed so much. And it's so funny just to see how much you can improve in just a year's time.
Yeah, and I mean, trying to just we missed a few weeks here and there, but we were pretty consistent throughout,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
not ever to be like saying, "Hey, like we've arrived," because we got a long ways to go.
Yeah.
But it is nice that at least the sound quality some better, and that it does seem like it's getting a little bit more polished. But yeah, I mean, you talked about things changing in a year. You know, your life has been you know, kind of flying by, honestly, with big time moving states and everything that y'all have got to go through. Another member of your family got married. Just a massive year for you and your family.
Yeah, it's been absolutely insane. Talking about some of those things is wild. And also for you guys, though, as well. I mean, you guys have had a lot of great things happen. I mean, I know you were able to defeat your cancer, which was unbelievable. And, I would love for you to give a little update on this past week of some of the news that you got, which was super exciting and a huge answer to prayer for that as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Talk about massive life changes. We get the shocking news. First year of refing, back high school basketball after 5 years of coaching, and then as soon as that ends, essentially get diagnosed with stage one leukemia, not leukemia, lymphoma, and kind of shell shocked the family. But I mean, God was good. He was in it the entire way. Went through the treatments, went through it, and actually this last week I had my 3 month checkup after my final treatment, and my PET scan came back completely clear, and they said, "Hey, we're going to go ahead and push the next one out for 4 months to give some time because it looks very good." And we're happy with your progress. So that was a blessing from the Lord again, just to his continued healing and provisions. And even if he didn't, he's still good, but we're praising
Absolutely.
his name because of what he's done, and that's awesome.
Yeah, so it just goes to show how much can happen in a year, literally in just our lives, which are just, a blip on the radar. It's crazy that things, though, can go the way that they have gone and things can be so good. And really, truly, we've been super blessed, not only just, with those things that we've just discussed, but also like our friendship as well. Because really, probably most of you guys don't know. I mean, obviously, me and Zane have known each other probably for just about our whole lives, really. I mean, we've known each other for a really long time. But it really wasn't until like this past year that we really got to become friends, and really got to enjoy this awesome journey together. And I'm super excited for the future. So I just wanted to give you a thank you as well for putting up with me for this past year and my crazy schedule and sometimes missing episodes, and stuff like that. Which I think every time we missed an episode was probably my fault. But no, I just
Well,
I
I
just
mean,
want to
we
thank
both
you.
have busy schedules, so we move around.
Yeah, but I do just want to thank you, and your friendship has been awesome. It's been really cool having a friend. Obviously I have friends that are into Marvel and Star Wars, but I never felt like anyone that really liked it as much as me until me and you really started talking, and getting to know each other better. And it's so cool to have a friend that's like really into it and was like super excited to start something like a podcast with me, because it takes a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, and you have to be on top of things. So it's really cool to have met somebody. I say meet somebody even though we've known each other, but that was super into like me, and really got to enjoy it. So I just wanted to thank you for that as well.
Well, I remember I had no clue that you even liked anything nerdy. And I remember that one Christmas I was talking to Austin, your brother-in-law, my cousin, at Christmas, and he was like, "Yeah, you should talk to Jacob. He loves Funko Pops," because I was telling him about one of my Funko Pops that I got, and I was like, "Really?" And I was like expecting you to like have like five, and then found out that you had this massive like over 1,000 pop collection, crazy. And I was like,
I wish. We're
whoa.
getting there. We're getting there. We're not quite there yet. Don't throw me under the bus too hard.
Was it 500? You had like 500
No,
pops at the
we're a
time or
little over.
something.
We're a little over 400 right now.
Okay. My
So
mistake. Maybe
we're
I'm
we're,
thinking dollar
we're closing
figure.
in. Oh yeah, probably dollar figure. Yeah,
Yeah, that may
yeah,
have been
for
what I was
sure.
thinking. But pretty incredible, and then kind of just hit it off from there. And it has been a blast to get to know you more, and to really develop that friendship. It's been a blast.
Yeah, so that's been super fun. But guys, we're not going to continue to be sappy and just saying thank you, but we do want to say from the bottom of our hearts, thank you guys so much for those of you that have tuned in and given us an opportunity. And we hope that you guys have enjoyed it as much as we have. And like I always say, recommend a friend. We're always trying to grow out here. But I think Zane has a few stats about the podcast that I think are super fun for you guys to hear. Just as we can learn so much from it, you guys can kind of get an idea of where the podcast has come from and where it's gone to, and obviously that is all due to you. So Zane, if you have those stats in front of you, I think
Yeah, I
now would be a
do.
great time to talk about it.
Yeah, so we have been kind of on an upward trajectory ever since April, and I think it kind of kicked off the progress once we announced it on Facebook after we felt like we upgraded our mics, and then Instagram, we started that kind of stuff, and Fallout was kind of the first show that we started to get some main, like some real tracking the progress.
Hmm.
But over the past year, we've had 1,418 downloads. That means we've had our podcast streamed over 1,418 times, which is really cool. And these stats, they actually filter out bots. They filter out listens that are under 15% of the podcast. So this means that many people have actually listened to our podcast through and through, and that is really cool. But I think the coolest thing is that in January we had about 18 downloads total for the month of January, and we really weren't going pretty much anywhere. We had six rolling average subscribers at that time, and we really kind of was like, well, I don't really know what we got. But now, this last month, we're up to 25 average subscribers, and our last few episodes have reached over 40 downloads each. So we've just been really impressed by you guys sharing the podcast and listening, and we love to see those numbers go up, and we're thankful that you guys are tuning in week after week, even with some of these projects that we have not super loved. That's one of the things that I was going back and listening to. It was so fun to start on two of our favorite shows that probably we've watched since comic books have come out, and that was with the Ahsoka show and with Loki, back to back, and what fun that has. And so, we finishing off like this last few months with some Acolyte, which we were mad about, and we've had Echo. So y'all stuck through it, even through the shows that we've been like, man, like we really couldn't bring as much excitement to it as we wanted to, but you guys have showed up time and time again, and we've consistently been creeping those numbers up, and we're thankful for that, guys.
I will say one thing though. I don't know if there's ever been more passion than in those Acolyte episodes. I got to say that real quick. Just get that off my chest a little bit. We were pretty passionate about that show, and our differing opinions on stuff, and so those were a really fun time. But yeah, guys, those are the stats for the podcast. Like I said, it's been really, really fun. Another cool announcement. Maybe you guys are interested on trying some other platforms and stuff. Here recently, Zane has gone out there and put us on YouTube. So if you guys are interested in using YouTube as your preferred podcast platform, you can definitely go check us out there. He's actually uploaded every podcast that we have done up to today. This one will be going up to YouTube as well. So if you guys like YouTube, go over there. You can check it out. You can hit that subscribe button. It's going to be another platform that I think we're going to try to grow on in this next year of our podcast. Obviously, it's not January. Our year is going to fall a little differently, just with the time of how we started the podcast. But that's another platform that you guys can check us out on if that's something you're interested in. But Zane, now that we've gone through those stats and anything, obviously we're probably going to talk a little bit more about our year throughout the rest of the podcast. But is there anything else you wanted to get off your chest before maybe we started diving into some of the fun stuff we have to talk about this week?
Well, I do say I think your passion for how much you hated Echo was more than Acolyte.
It might have been. That's a good point. I hated that show.
I mean, that was one of my favorite times. Was just listening to you hate on Echo, as I tried to defend moments that I tried to pull that was good on it. I definitely think that was more passion and dislike than anything that I did in Acolyte.
Yes, man, we've had some fun ones, and I think this is a great opportunity for you guys listening. If there's been an episode that you guys really enjoyed, or maybe a subject that we talked about for weeks, like Acolyte, like Echo, let us know. Reach out to us on those social media platforms. Let us know just maybe a period in time of the podcast where you guys were really eager and excited to hear what we had to say each week. As there for a while, like Zane was just mentioning, Acolyte and Echo were some fun topics as we were either spewing our hatred or our like for something. I thought that was a lot of fun. So yeah, that's a great point to bring up. But again, you guys should reach out to us and let us know if there was any part of the podcast era that you guys have enjoyed the most.
No, and I've definitely, I think for me, my favorite episode was definitely doing the top 5 Marvel villains. It was just so much fun to look through and to really, I mean, my favorite cinematic universe. So definitely, I think that was my favorite one, and we got a lot of good feedback on that ranking.
Sure, and there's so many things we could really do a whole episode just talking about fun stuff that we did in our year in the podcast, and maybe that's something you guys would like to hear. Maybe we could fight that in somewhere in our schedule as a bonus episode if you guys would really like for us to delve into it, because we've had a lot of really cool projects come out in our year. I mean, we got to see arguably one of the best movie of all time in the theaters in Dune 2. We got to see one of the most hyped Marvel movies in a really long time in Deadpool and Wolverine. There's been so much cool stuff come out. We've got to see, Ahsoka. We've got to see Mandalorian. We've got to see Loki. It's just been such an awesome time, I think, to start a podcast. And to be fair, we really couldn't have picked a better time with as much subjects as we've had to talk about, in our time doing this. So if that's something you guys would be interested in hearing, maybe us do a deeper dive into our year in review, where we just break down some of our favorite episodes from our favorite movies that we had the chance to review, let us know, and we could always try to fight that into our schedule, try to figure out a spot to place it there, and we could do a whole episode dedicated to that. But we don't want to do that today because we've had some crazy stuff come out this past week. But before we get into any of that, just today, the time of doing this podcast, we did get a new Thunderbolts trailer. Now, I did not watch it because I assumed it was the exact same trailer that we got leaked back from, I guess it was that SDCC or was that D23 when the Thunderbolts trailer got leaked?
It was San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay, so SDCC, I was under the impression that this was just the official release of that trailer, but I know, Zane, you said there were some differences, and you actually did watch it. What did you think? Did this get you even more excited? Because I know we were kind of high on it after that leak, but I know you said there were some things different. What did you like about this trailer?
Oh, I think this is my most anticipated Marvel thing coming out. I'm very excited about that. I am more excited about this movie than I am about Secret Wars because I think that what they put forward here is clean cut. We have established characters that we like, that don't have the history to botch. And that's what I'm very excited about is this, these are some newer characters that we have some time with but haven't got their time to shine, and I'm very excited about that. We have the introduction of Sentry, which I think that they are going to potentially nail. Now I'm a little worried about that because there is some rumors that the Void is not going to be his alternate personality but actually a area of space that they go to. And I'm curious how they'll tackle that. But regardless, I think they're going to do it well. And it looked fun. There was more Bucky in this trailer than in the San Diego Comic Con. There's a little bit more scenes at the end of it, and then I think there may have been more Dreyfus character. But I really thought this trailer was very well put together. It's a clear picture of what the movie's going to be about. And I think there's a lot left on the table that they're not showing us that we're going to see. And I'm very excited about this film.
Well, I think what's really cool about this one in particular is it's kind of got that Avengers vibe to it, where we're seeing some of those characters that we've seen in other projects come together. And really like what you said about not having a history to be botched here for these characters. Obviously, we do have some history. We have seen them before. They're not completely new to us, but they are in a sense that we don't really have a lot to go off of. So they really kind of do have an open notebook here to have some fun and to expound on some things that they might not have had the opportunity to if they did have more of a, written down background that we already knew and associated with that character. So I really do like that idea. But this is going to be a fun one, I think. I think it's got that really dark and gritty grime to it that we kind of like in Marvel shows every once in a while. I think we're getting that as well in Captain America, Brave New World. I think it's kind of got that same vibe. So I think we're in for a really good treat here with the upcoming Marvel projects. And this was one I'm already very excited for. So I'll definitely have to check out the trailer just to see a little bit more of what those things that you said they added was. I do know I saw some people mention some things about Bucky. So you reiterating that is really cool. I think he's going to be a big part of the movie. And I think a lot of people are excited to see what happens with that character. So I definitely think that is something to keep your eyes out for.
Well, I think it's funny because in the press screenings and some interviews, Sebastian Stan, who plays Bucky, has actually said that he's leading the Thunderbolts. When there's other reports that are that Florence Pugh's character is going to be leading. So yeah, is it Elena? Is it Bucky? Is there some contention there? And so that's actually kind of exciting for me as well, kind of see what they're going to bring to the table and who's going to kind of wrangle these in, because I believe Bucky is actually a senator at the time that the Thunderbolts takes place.
So what I think would be really funny is, we just saw a publicity stunt with Agatha where they were constantly changing the names and doing all this stuff. I think it'd be really funny if from now on, every time one of these characters got interviewed, if they all said, I'm leading the Thunderbolts, and let that kind of be a contention throughout the movie. I think that would be fantastic. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think that would be funny. I think this is definitely a group that they would all throughout the entire movie be like, well, I'm in charge.
Yeah, that's actually very good, especially if like U.S. Agent would do it next. I think he would be one who's like arrogant enough to be like, I'm actually leading because I was Captain America.
Yep.
So no, but you said earlier that there was an Avengers-esque vibe to the team, and I think they're gonna play into that potentially with making this team the Dark Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons is because they added a official asterisk to the title, and I don't know if you saw that, but
yes,
that was actually, now that is the real title. It is added to their I guess official announcement for it, and so I'm curious what that is. If that's just like, hey, we're gonna name it Thunderbolts now, but we're actually gonna rename it at the end of the movie, kind of like they did with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where they tried to change it to Captain America and the Winter Soldier. So interesting. I'm curious what they'll do there. And, we've seen Agatha's, like you said, Agatha publicity stunt of changing the name. Are they going to do that again? Interesting what they're doing here, but wonder how it plays into the movie.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be shocked if at the end of the movie, after we've watched the end credit scene or whatever, maybe it does pop up on a screen. We see that asterisk go away and it says the Dark Avengers or something along those lines. I think that would be really fun and really exciting for fans because you know us Marvel fans, we live for that end credit scene. But you know, this is going to be a great movie. It's super exciting. And Marvel, I think, has really started to establish itself back into gaining some hype. I know for me, especially, there's been a lot of things that I've just been like, oh, I'm going to go watch it because it's Marvel. I'm going to put up with it. But I've really got some excitement for these last few movies. I think a lot of that's credited to Deadpool and Wolverine has really kind of got us excited for Marvel again, which I know you've always been excited, and maybe I've been the one that's a little bit like, I don't know how excited I am for this project. I think the few that we have for sure coming out, I am definitely excited for, so that's really fun. But one that we recently just got, and I have not had a chance to watch it, and I think you did watch an episode of it, was Agatha All Along. Now, that is now streaming on Disney Plus for those of you that may have already seen it, or maybe those of you that had forgotten. It is available for you guys to watch, but we are not going to be reviewing it this week, as we have a bunch of other things that we wanted to talk about, in addition to debuting our new segment on the podcast at the end of the episode. But Zane, what did you think about the episode that you watched? And I don't know if it was just a one episode release, or was it 2 or 3 episodes? What did you think a little bit about Agatha? I know we're not going to spend too much time on it, but I know you did get a chance to watch it.
So actually, I did not watch it. Now
Okay.
it was a 2 episode release, but we had company in this week, so it really limited our ability to watch shows. And we watched The Penguin, we watched Rings of Power, and then we did our comic corner. So I was very busy. We had a lot of other stuff going on, and Agatha is just not one that you just talked about Marvel hype being back.
Yeah.
Agatha's not one that I would watch if it wasn't in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And
Hmm.
so because it's not one that I would necessarily lean to without it, I was like, okay, well, I'll wait until this next week to watch it when I can really like take my time and enjoy it and really give it a shot. I didn't want to rush it in with all these other ones because
Exactly.
I already am kind of not wanting to watch it because of the content that it has and then the buzz around it. We talked last week about what was it, Lightyear with the insertion of the LGBTQ agenda into everything and how that affects the the marketing and how it affects our viewing because it goes against our worldview. And so just another thing that kind of hesitant. Now I'm not gonna judge it before I watch it. I will give it a shot, but there is a very big potential that I don't finish the show because I just disagree with the stances and the stance that it's taking and what it's trying to put forward from what I've heard. So because of those, I was like, okay, we're gonna take a step back. Jacob, you weren't interested in watching it at all this weekend, and
No.
so I was like, okay, because of that, we're gonna take a break. I was very excited to watch The Penguin, and Rings of Power is really picking up. So I thought we'd keep it a very positive episode, especially for our 1 year anniversary on the podcast, and review those. So I kind of waited off on those.
Yeah, so those are kind of the reasons why we're going to skip on Agatha this week. So if you are here for our Agatha review or you get our initial thoughts on it, definitely be back next week. That is going to be probably the main topic of next week's show. But those are the reasons why we skipped on it. We do just have a lot of other things coming out. And like he touched on, this was not something that really piqued our interest a whole lot. So we're going to go ahead and move on from Marvel. And I think we're going to talk about what my favorite thing that we got to watch this week was, and that is The Penguin. Now, The Penguin is such an interesting idea for a show because it takes place in the Batman universe, Robert Pattinson's universe. And I absolutely loved that Batman movie. I talked about it on the podcast. I really, really enjoyed it. So getting this was really an exciting thing for me. And I got to say, just, before we really dive into talking about it a little bit, for me personally, it definitely lived up to the hype. Zane, how did you feel after that first episode?
Yeah, one of the biggest things for me is you talked about the Batterson universe and how much you love the Batman film, and for me, I really enjoyed it. I thought it had a bunch of really good stuff, but it didn't hit for me quite like it did everyone else, it seemed. But I still really enjoyed the film, and I was very excited for this. But I felt like it was a little odd choice to move forward immediately with, kind of almost like Agatha. Like, why are we necessarily getting a Penguin series after that? Like, shouldn't we focus on somebody else? But boy, was I wrong, because I thoroughly enjoyed this first episode. And if you're coming into this and you're like, hey, I I haven't seen the Batman. I don't really want to watch a movie in order to watch a show and have a bunch of tie-ins. My wife sat down and watched this with me. She has not seen the Batman, and she actually thoroughly enjoyed the show as well. It was very, very enjoyable watch for her, and she's excited to continue watching it. So I actually think that speaks volumes for just the quality of show and what the show was able to do in one episode, which I personally haven't felt like that after one episode of television since probably Loki.
Yeah, for sure. Because I felt the exact same way. Now, you touched on people being able to hop into this show without having watched the movie, and props to them for really pulling that off because they do make some hints at what happened in the Batman movie, but it wasn't so much that you were like, even for me, I haven't watched it since I watched it in the movie theater. So obviously, I don't remember everything that even happened in the movie. There was never a time where I was like, I don't even know what they're referencing. I don't remember that. They really just did a great job of just kind of letting this be its own story. And I know the director has really made an emphasis on not really wanting this. And some people have hated him saying this because he has said it a bunch, but he hasn't wanted the Batman or the Penguin to be referred to as comic book movies or shows. He has just wanted them to be good movies and shows. And I kind of really appreciate him taking that stance because just because you throw the Batman on there, just because you slap the Penguin on there, doesn't mean it's going to be good and get views. You have to have just a good, solid story for people to really enjoy that. So I think that's great that he's kind of taking that step back and be like, I don't care if this is Batman associated. I don't care if this has anything to do with the DC universe. I just wanted to make a good movie and a good show, and I think it's really paying dividends because this was just an absolute blast from start to finish.
Yeah, and you touched on like how well of a job they did at the start of the show, kind of not like dragging through the Batman. Um, I guess synopsis. They didn't like do a long monologue about like recapping everything. They put a very good news article at the front, kind of to give you a status of the city while the credits roll, and essentially that's it. And I love that. I thought that was a really good intro to kind of set the stage of what's going on. And boy, do they do it. And I personally wouldn't have like if they rename the city, then there's no way you really would think this was a Batman film. Now there's
Mm-hmm.
there's things to Arkham, and if you know the characters' names, then obviously you're going to be a fan. But Chelsea said the only way that she knew this was even related to the Batman was because it was Gotham,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think they did a really good job of doing that. There's one of my favorite artists is NF, and he's a rapper who is a Christian, and he always says, "Hey, like you can just call me a rapper who's a Christian. Like my music will stand on its own. Like you don't have to put me in the genre of Christian rap. Like I'm a rapper who is Christian. You don't call them Christian plumbers." And I think that's kind of like the stance that they're taking here with this is like, hey, it's just a good TV show. The source material may be a comic book, but like it's a good TV show, and so we want it to be known as a good TV show and stand on its own without that baggage that comic book movies kind of have now.
Yeah, which is like I just touched on. You're reiterating it. I love that comparison. That's what I think makes this stand out so much. Is it's awesome that Chelsea was able to watch this and she really didn't care that Batman was involved at all. And that's so good for just the comic book industry as a whole and that genre is it's going to get the average viewer interested. And that's ultimately what's going to drive things forward. That's what everyone wants to do. They want to get everybody involved so everyone can enjoy it and move on with it. So I absolutely love that stance. And I know there's been a lot of purists out there that are like, quit saying that, if it wasn't for the source material, you wouldn't even be in this position. I still think that they are doing such a good job of just making it a good show overall that it has been such a blast to watch. Now, I think it's going in a really good direction. I love the characters, and that's one of the first things I wanted to talk about as we break down this episode a little bit is the castings. I don't think they could have done a better job. And, seeing Colin Farrell as the Penguin again just further reiterates how good he was in the movie. But man, he is fantastic as the Penguin in this first episode.
Yeah, man, it's crazy to look at him and be like, man, is that Colin Farrell? And keep reminding yourself, like, he is a fantastic actor,
Yeah.
and just even the way he kind of embodies it. I love the waddle. I love the
Yep.
penguin
The Penguin
waddle.
Waddle.
What an amazing like little character moment, and like to be so consistent with it, and to really kind of encapsulate those body dysmorphias that he has, and just it shines through. And I kept getting glimpses. I don't know if you did, but I kept getting glimpses of what is it? Kingpin vibes. I feel like
Hmm.
this is like very Kingpin vibes, but one that hasn't been established and one that doesn't have any self confidence. He has all the same abilities and same kind of uh, what is brutality, and his thought processes is just as good, but he doesn't have that swag. He doesn't have that like I deserve to be here moments quite yet. And I really enjoyed kind of picking that comparison because that's one of my favorite villains in a TV show ever. And so to kind of see it from his perspective and rightly told from his perspective, right? This is a Kingpin story that's being told from Kingpin's perspective, which we've had some villain projects in the past that have been told from the good guy's perspective. And I'm glad that this is really following him and telling his story. And it's really, you talked about characters. He's doing a fantastic job. And at the end, kind of go ahead and give you a spoiler warning. We're going to get right into it. But man, to see how clever he was with what he did to set up the ending, it really made the show for me to really establish him as a really master manipulator threat, and that he's not just some chump on the streets who's found his way to power, but he's very intelligent. He's very intentional with what he does. Even the way that he got himself off the hook, man, it all came together so clean and so nice. I was very, very happy with it.
Yeah, it even had you thinking at the end of that episode, you're like, well, did the Maronis really do that? And then you're kind of like, no, this was his plan all along. So it really was fun to kind of watch it all develop. You touched on him kind of, the waddle and all that stuff. I love those things. That's another thing the director actually spoke on is we're really probably not going to hear him called the Penguin as much because when they really do a good job touching on it, when he gets made fun of or he feels like he's being disrespected, he doesn't appreciate it. And we see that with Falcone's son when he just, shoots him for making fun of his dream of being kind of a good gangster. And I thought that was really cool that the director has come out and said, hey, he doesn't like being called the Penguin. So you might not hear him called that very much because he views that as a sign of disrespect. But I've seen a lot of people say, how cool would it be if by the end of this, he kind of just embraces that and he kind of embraces that moniker. I think that would be such a cool idea with how this show is going. But no, the overall story has been fantastic. We touched on the acting a little bit. One of the other things I wanted to touch on is I think the set pieces were really, really good for this. I never felt like I was taken out of a scene because it looked awkward. Now, this definitely plays on some of using those dark room vibes, very similarly to how the Batman did. But I definitely think now at this point, that is more of a direction that they are wanting to go from a producing standpoint rather than a way of cutting costs. Because we all know when you use those dark rooms, you can kind of hide some stuff in the background so you don't have to make it look as good. I think they just did a really good job overall of making this feel like a dark and gritty show.
Yeah, but I never felt like it was dark. Like the things that I needed to see were dark. And
Yes,
that's something
yes.
I really appreciate is like, especially because my TV, we and my wife have been talking about it, like we kind of need a new one. Because like I like when we watch dark shows, I was even thinking about Rings of Power when the elves were fighting the like ghost people. I was trying to watch that during the day. I really couldn't see what was going on, but I never felt like that in this show. I felt like it was always like, even though it was dark and gritty vibe, you could always clearly see what they were portraying. It was shot very well, and the set pieces were good. I will say the overarching shots of Gotham kind of seemed a little CGI esque to me, and it
Yeah.
kind of did take me out for a second. But as soon as they zoom into an actual set piece, I'm always hooked right back in. I don't have any issues with that, and I'm okay with that. It's a TV show, it's a TV budget. I don't expect perfection, but as long as what they're showing and what matters is good, I'm always happy with that.
And I think that's one thing I've always noticed in really any Batman project. It's really hard to kind of show what Gotham is. So I think it's kind of cool that they're still showing it, but like you said, they're making sure everything else is really put in a place that it needs to be, and it does look good overall. So that was something I was super happy about. We touched on the acting being fantastic. What did you think of just the storyline that we're going with? I know you touched on it a little bit, how you like that, you're able to hop right into it. You don't really need to have seen the Batman for this to make sense. This really feels like that kind of crime lord type vibe, which I know a lot of people really appreciate. And I think that's probably why both of our wives really like it, is they love those crime-esque thrillers, right? And this definitely has those vibes with it. Are you excited to continue to see where the story goes?
Oh yeah, I think anytime you give like a power vacuum esque scenario where there's multiple parties involved. You give a bunch of stakes. You immediately set the stage that death is real, that there's a potential for at any time for someone in the show to die. I think that's a really good place to put it, and it makes me excited for what they're going to do. Clearly, we got the Marconis that are going to get involved pretty quickly. The Falcons obviously are the superior powerhouse right now, and you touched on Colin Farrell, but Kristen
Melody. Yeah.
Melody, dude, I'm scared of Sophia. She is terrifying. She is definitely a psychopath, and I love it.
So that's one of the things I did want to get to, going back to the acting a little bit. They asked her in an interview how excited she was to be in the show. And it's so refreshing when you hear an actor be excited to be in something that's comic book related. Because I feel like in today's society, we hear so much people talk bad about being in a comic book thing, or we hear so many people be like, yeah, I just don't want to do this character anymore. La-di-da-di-da. In the interview, she actually said how excited she was to finally be involved in a comic book show-esque movie, whatever you want to say. And I thought that was really refreshing to hear. She said how many times she has auditioned to be in movies like this or shows like this, and she never got the call back. And so it's really exciting just for her from a standpoint of, being cool for an actor to finally get that role that they've been hunting for. And she definitely delivered with her performance in this show. I think the same thing. She is scary. You really don't know what she's ever going to do. You don't know if she knows what the Penguin's lying about. You don't know anything. She did a really good job of just portraying that character.
Yeah, and I was very happy with everything she did. And also Renzi Feliz, who plays Victor, I thought he killed it as well.
Yep.
The first time I saw him was in Runaways. He's the lead actor in that. That's a Hulu series, actually a Marvel Hulu series, and he was good in that. But he's really progressed in this show, and I'm very impressed with him and what he's doing in this. Acting all around, no one has disappointed. No one has been taking me out of the scenes. I thought they've done a really good job. I didn't want the episode to end, and that's a really good thing. You talked about how Rings of Power was too long, but this was just as long. And I have the feeling you don't have that quarrel with this show.
No, and I think the big thing with this is I never felt like there was a scene that I was like, what was the point of that? I felt like every scene was really pushing the story forward, and obviously it's kind of easy to do on episode 1 because everything's so new. You really don't know exactly the direction they're going. So it is easy to make sure the story is progressing in that first episode. So I'm definitely going to be interested to see if they can continue that into episode 2 and keep me that attached to it. But no, I definitely did not feel that way about this episode. I'm going to go ahead again and say it. I did feel that way about this Rings of Power episode again, which we're going to get to here in a moment. We need a boo button. I know you, Zane. So little thing Zane's been working on is we're gonna have an button hopefully for our next what is that? Our monthly breakdown
Our
of what's
rundown.
coming out. Yeah, our monthly rundown. So maybe we need a boo button as well. But no, this episode was really fun from start to finish for me. I never felt bored. I felt the same way as you. I kind of wanted to continue going, and I just think that speaks volumes for our first episode.
Now, I do want to give this disclaimer because I feel like it's important in everything we do. This does have a significant amount of language, and there is some sexual content in it that I would not recommend anyone to allow their children to watch this, and even yourself watch it with caution, especially if you're sensitive to those things. Be wary of that. There's obviously violence as well. It's a clear TVMA. So if you're like, hey, this is a comic book movie, and they're really liking it, I will say, hey, it is not a family friendly film or a TV series in any manner. So just go forward with that disclaimer. If after this breakdown you're like, hey, I really want to watch that, this may not be for you. So make sure you tune into the ratings. You look at the parent guardian overviews on this your favorite I guess filter website. But
yeah, for sure. And this one, like he did touch on, it does have a good bit of gore as well. So again, if you are sensitive to those type of things, definitely be cautious there. Now, before we move on from the Penguin, though, I did want to ask you a quick question that you might not really have an answer to, because I don't necessarily even think I have an answer to it yet with this show. But I do know that we're not supposed to see the Batman in this show at all. Now, there was a little bit of an Easter egg. I don't know if you caught it when the Penguin is actually on Carmine Falcone's phone. He sees that he has an event coming up, a schedule with the Gotham Knights. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with the Gotham Knights, they are kind of a group of heroes that were trained by Batman that ultimately help him make sure Gotham is under control. Do you think we are going to see some other characters, more mainstream characters, other than obviously the Penguin in this. I know obviously some people could say the Falcons and the Maronis are kind of mainstream characters in Batman, and they definitely are. They're very important crime lords in this setting. But do you think we see maybe some bigger characters? Maybe we see like, I don't want to say necessarily a Mr. Freeze because that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, but maybe they could tie it in some way. Do we see a Joker? Do we see something like that? Or do you think they're going to really kind of keep this more self contained?
Well, so in the Batman, we definitely already saw our first look at the Joker in
Yeah.
Arkham. And so I think there's always a possibility of something like that. Definitely no Mr. Freeze. They're very anti anything fantastical in this one. They want to keep
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
very, very grounded. So I would say we don't see any mainstream ones. And that's kind of because I think this is a little bit of a risk TV series. I know they're excited about it, and clearly it's getting great reviews right now. But this was not a sure thing. And so I don't think they are going to go ahead and throw in to like make a bigger universe, especially when we already know that the DC U is actually kicking off with James Gunn. So I don't know what liberties they had, but I personally, my honest guess right now would say, hey, we don't see anything coming as far as like major cameos.
I'm thinking the same thing. I definitely think there's always a possibility to see like something random, like a batarang or something show up. And I'm not saying it's going to be something like that, but I think there's those possibilities are for sure in the cards. But I kind of hope, honestly, that they do keep this self-contained with the Penguin. Let him have his moment and let this be his show. He doesn't need anybody else to make this show any better. And I think you're right on the nail there with the Batman 2 is also coming out, so I don't think they're going to want to put a lot of stuff into this that they might have necessarily wanted to save for that. So I hope they keep it self-contained, but it's always fun to speculate on if we're going to see anything like that because in these worlds there's always the possibility. But is there anything else you would like to talk about on the Penguin before we moved on to our Rings of Power discussion?
I do just want to say that the pace of this show has been great, and a lot of critiques we've had in recent shows have been the pacing is all over the place. I know that's your problem with Rings of Power,
Mhm.
but the pace of this show was kind of a masterclass on how to keep the story going. And like you said, I really hope they keep that up. So, just wanted to sing the praise real quick of something that we've harped on shows in the past, but that this one really did well. But with that, I'm good to move on to Rings of Power.
Yeah, I gotta agree. The pacing was really good in this. But moving on to Rings of Power, where again I feel like the pacing was off again. But I know you really were excited about this because you messaged me after you had watched it and you're like, "Holy cow!" Tell me what you thought about this episode. What did you love, and is there anything that you didn't like about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much I didn't like with it. Let's go ahead and start with the meh for me. And the whole meh for me is the Adar and Galadriel scenes.
Hmm.
It was okay. It was fine. I don't love it. I don't love that he kind of is like just using her for information there, and the whole thing was a hoax so that he could get there, and then he's the one that's being manipulated by Sauron to make him his own army. I didn't love that whole thing, but everything else in this was great. We had so many great character moments. One of my absolute favorites, and I don't know if you caught it. Was there a quote in this scene that came from any of the other Lord of the Rings movies? I want
Are
I
you
want
talking
to
about Bombadil?
Yes,
Yeah.
Bombadil with man when he says, "Hey, many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them?" And I just, I loved it. That's exactly what Gandalf said to Frodo when he said that he wished that Smeagol would die, in the cave there in the mountain. And I think that's confirmation that we got Gandalf. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of been confirmed in my mind for a little while now. But it is still technically we still haven't been told for sure. So they could be pulling, the sheets over our head. But I really do think that was kind of really that's been the first moment that's kind of been, if you weren't, I don't even know how to say it. That was really our first telltale sign that that's kind of who they were referencing. Because up to this point, they really hadn't really made many mentions of things that would correlate to Gandalf. That was the first one that you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, and I think we saw his staff in the vision, right? And then his love for the halflings or Harfoots. So there's definitely those things. But man. You talk about great character moments. Lindell just continues to just
Uh,
improve and improve and improve, man. When he is in that prison and he's like, man, faith isn't faith unless it's lived. What a truth that is. An amazing character moment of him just living his faith, and then at his trial when he forgives, he'll apologize for his crimes, but he will not pledge allegiance to Farazan. And I can't get enough of it. I'm all in on Lindeel. Give me more Lindeel in this show.
yeah, and that was such a good scene to me as well because when you see the queen come down there, I was like, oh, he's just gonna listen to her. She's gonna tell him like, hey, just go with the flow. We need you alive, la di da di da. And when I heard him say, no, I'm not doing it, I was like, yes, that's exactly what we want. We don't want another guy just to go with the flow. We want someone that's gonna butt heads with the king like that and really kind of live his truth. And I felt the exact same way about it. Yeah, I've been saying for a while now, the Numenor stuff is really interesting me and really exciting for me. And man, it is just continuing to get better and better. And it seems to be the only part of the show that I'm really enjoying right now because talking about more about this episode, we do finally, we just mentioned the Bombadil and Gandalf scene. I kind of just felt like it was another bit of a waste of a scene. And the saying we got was super cool. Like, I love that. Really fun. But again, it really didn't drive the story very much forward, and obviously Gandalf has the decision to make of whether he needs to, fight for the greater good or go save Nori. And that's fun, that's cool that we're getting there. But again, it really didn't feel like it pushed the story much. You touched on the Galadriel and Adar thing. Really didn't understand much of that either, because I felt like that could have been summed up way quicker than it was. And then we have Celebrimbor and Anatar or Sauron. And again, I just feel like that is just lingering on. And what the show keeps doing to me that's really bothering me is we're getting no action. And I know action is not necessarily needed for a show to be good. And I wish I wasn't feeling that way. But I feel like they just keep leaving us right there when we're about to finally get to the action. The episode ends. So that's kind of been my problem with the last few episodes is we're finally starting to see some cool stuff. Things are starting to pop off. Things are getting into place. And then the episode ends. And so I think that's why I'm enjoying the Elendil stuff so much, because that's really not ending. We're really getting to see that, it's not really necessarily sword fighting, but it's high stakes, high intensity scenes. And everywhere else, it's kind of just been kind of like cool, calm conversation.
Yeah, and I can see what you're saying. However, I do see that the Gandalf Stranger stuff with Tom Bombadil, you said it didn't push the story forward much, but I definitely think it pushed the story forward as much as it did with the screen time. They only had like 5 minutes of screen
Mm-hmm.
time, maybe, and they did push the story forward a little bit with showing him that he's failed every trial recently. He only has one shot left before Tom Bombadil doesn't train him, and to kind of see if this is his path. And I think the actual test is if he will give up the greater good for life. And I think that's the actual trial, and the finding the staff is the fake trial. I think they're going to use that as kind of like, we want to make sure that you value life over power, and then we'll train you. And so I think that's a little bit of a misdirection that they're sending. I think he will choose Nori, and then Tom Bombadil will train him. But I think it gave a lot in such little time. Something that we didn't get much of. We got the action right off the back with Arondir, who
Yeah.
is absolutely amazing, but we only see him for a split second.
Yep.
But then we don't see him again. However, we do get a big lead up to where he's going, right? He gets the map. He then sees the warpath and that they're headed to Celebrimbor City, and that's where the attack's going to be. So even though it's only a few minutes, and because we have so many storylines, we get to know where he's going with it. So I think we are progressing the story pretty rapidly, especially with, and you talked about the Celebrimbor and Sauron or Anatar. Man, did they fix a lot of stuff? What they did in this episode is what I wanted the entire time Sauron to be doing to Celebrimbor, for me to fully believe what he's doing. And we really got to see Sauron's power. And man, when we saw that transition from what he's showing Celebrimbor into what is actually happening there at the end, from the day to night, what a shot, what cinematography. I was all about it. And so I think this entire show, this one really set the scene for the entire ending while giving me exactly what I was complaining about. They fixed it. Now, I mean, they can't redo what they've done, but they really got to show off Sauron's manipulation powers, and I was all about it.
Yeah, the Sauron manipulation stuff was really good, but it just why is it taking so long for us to get there? And I think a lot of those things are just building up on my complaints with the show. I will say the transition was super cool, and this continues to be one of the best looking shows I've ever seen. Every time there's a good landscape scene or something like that, when we saw Elendil and ultimately the queen end up jumping into the water, that was absolutely breathtaking. It looked so cool. I love that stuff. I just spoke on the transition. I thought that was fantastic. And I see what you're saying. I agree with a lot of the points you're making is they finally gave us some of the stuff of what we're wanting. It just felt like it was stuff that could have been done in a shorter amount of time, but we spent a whole episode on. And so I do think next episode is going to be one that you guys are going to hear me singing the praises of the show. Unless we switch stories again, and if we get a whole episode dedicated to Nori and the Harfoots and the Storts and Stranger, aka Gandalf, I'm going to be supremely upset with this show as they continue to just take away the action scenes from us right when we think we're about to get them. So I'm just hoping and hoping and hoping that this next episode doesn't do what it's done the entirety of the show and switch up on us here and go to a completely different storyline. But that's what I'm worried about. Do you think that's what they're going to do, or do you think we're finally going to get to see some action? Maybe see these orcs and these elves go at it a little bit? What do you think is going to happen?
I think that we're definitely going to see more action in this next episode than we will. I think we're definitely going to see the siege clearly. What's Calibrimborn's city's name?
Eregion.
Eregion. I definitely think we're going to see that siege. I don't know how much action we're going to be, and it's definitely going to be split up with Nori. So I think this next episode we're going to see the siege. We're going to see Doran and Desi fight off his father from mining mithril, which I think will be action. And then we're going to see Nori getting captured and Gandalf slash the stranger coming to her aid, rescue her, which I don't know if they're going to do that well. I think that was one of the biggest missteps in this whole episode, in this whole season, was separating the stranger from Nori. I thought they played really well together, and Nori and Poppy do not play well detached from him, in my opinion. So I think we're going to definitely see those three things in this next episode, because we are wrapping up the season. We only have 2 episodes left, and that's kind of massive. So I definitely think the action will pick it up. But I just touched on what I think is going to happen with Doran. Did you like what happened with the dwarves in this episode?
Yeah, so the dwarves continue to be probably the only part of this entire show that has never been uninteresting. They continue to make it really fun and enjoyable. I loved Disa singing and the bats coming down and scaring away the miners. Thought that was really cool. It's kind of showing her connection with the mountain, which was a big talking point. The king doesn't think that they need the mountain singers anymore because he has the ring now. And I think it's really cool to still see that connection of what these people have dedicated their lives to do for their kingdom is, hey, we learned how to sing for the mountain so we could learn to keep our kingdom afloat. So I really thought that was a cool aspect. I really loved when Sauron was there talking to the king and he looks into the fire and he sees the Balrog. That was really exciting and really cool to see. So the dwarves are just awesome. I continue to love them. And I said it before and I'll say it again. I would have been happy if we just got a show about the dwarves. And I know we've seen so much dwarves in Lord of the Rings and all that stuff, but they're just so fun and it's so good and the acting is so great and the storyline is there. I absolutely loved what we got from the dwarves this episode.
Yeah, it was good. I didn't love the Disa as much. I think it was a little too small scale for what is happening. I think her and Dora needed to recruit more mountain singers and kind of establish a full resistance to the king, instead of just kind of standing there by themselves. And so I think that was my only letdown with that, is they definitely, if it seems a little very small scale for the dwarven. There needs to be someone other than just those two at this point. When they do know that the full force of the king is going to come after him, he sees the power of the ring, not only in the ability to understand the mountain, but also in the force that it produced when he pushed him off of him. I feel like at that moment he's like, "Hey, we need help," and I wish he would have went for more sympathizers to resist I guess the haphazard um, just mining. And I love the distinction as well between the mountain singers and the king's power of the ring, because he's completely lifeless, and it seems like the mountain singers only care about life almost, and
Mhm.
their connection is only to the life within the mountain, whereas he is only concerned about the greed within the mountain. And I love that distinction. That's always something fun. I love when we can connect with nature and kind of put them in the power, and instead of just abusing them, we can kind of team with them to get to the goal that we want. I really enjoy that, so I thought that was a neat little inclusion that they put there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's going to be a continued story point that we just enjoy because I think it's been really fun. Is the dwarves, and we talked about it again. It's really cool to see how they got their, I guess the word was persona, maybe, or maybe their like thing about them being greedy. I think that's been really cool and fun to kind of learn throughout this show. But other than that, I think that's a large part of the Rings of the Power talk. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we moved on to our new segment?
No, there was a lot that happened there, but I mean, I think we had a bunch there to talk about, and it was really good. Very satisfied. I know you may have been a little bit let down again by the show, which is sad. But I've been continued to be impressed and enjoy every time I sit down to watch this. It's definitely something that I will give up doing something for to watch. I'm always willing to give up an hour of my time to watch this, and so I think that's a good show when it's willing. I'm willing to not game, or willing to not give up an hour of sleep to watch a show. And it hasn't put me to sleep at all. I know some people are saying this is a snore fest, but I think it's just been such a masterclass in cinematography and story writing, minus a few points that I've really really enjoyed this.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. So you guys don't freak out. I am still enjoying the show enough to where I'm excited to watch the new episodes. They just keep me leaving wanting more so much, and it gets to the point when you're wanting more so often that you get frustrated when you're not getting it. And I feel like that's just what has been my complaint with the show is we get so close to finally getting where I want to be, and I'm so excited to finally see things start to unfold, and then the episode ends and the next episode picks up somewhere completely different.
Yeah,
That's
the
been my
Walking Dead
complaint with it.
syndrome.
Yeah, it literally is. But yeah, so that's been my thing. I don't hate the show. I am enjoying it. I'm excited to continue to watch it. And I know it's going to pay off. I just think I'm getting irritated with us getting there. But I know that's a me problem because I know a lot of people are actually enjoying it for what it is. And I'm still enjoying it. But that's kind of where I'm at with the Rings of Power. Now, I'm super excited to talk about this next thing. It's something we've been talking about for quite some time now, and we've alluded to it in the past, but this is going to be the initial debut of our new monthly segment called Comic Corner. Now, Comic Corner is going to be really fun because we are going to be taking a series of comics, and we're usually going to try to keep it on the smaller side. You know, there's limited run comics that we get, those shorter form stories, and we're going to read the entire comic series, and we're going to break it down, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, talk about some of our few favorite lines, some of our favorite art panels, and kind of go from there. Now, this has been super fun. We have picked our comic and we've actually already read it and we are ready to talk about it. But Zane, do you want to go ahead and talk about which comic we picked and kind of go into our thought process on why we did pick this comic in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this month we picked the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow 8 comic run series. Now we picked this run first off because Jacob hasn't really read any DC, and we really wanted to dive into DC. With the DCU starting up, he wanted to get some excitement and some juices flowing for that, so that he could kind of be introduced into that world. And what better way than with the official comic book that James Gunn has pulled from to establish the DCU. So, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is the James Gunn's source material for the Supergirl movie and the lifeblood for his Monsters and Gods universe. So that's kind of his first season of the DCU will be Monsters and Gods, and so this really kind of sets the stage. And after reading this comic, I really understand more why he's saying, "Hey, this is going to set my stage." And I don't know if it did for you, but it really did for me. Get excited about the world building that he is going to do and what type of story he's going to tell. This isn't going to be an introduction to a universe. It's going to be a jumping off point in an established universe that we haven't seen. And sometimes that can be scary for people, that they may be missing out or they may not understand something. But especially if you were to pick up this comic and read it, I don't think there's ever a time in this where you're going to be like, I really feel lost. Now there may be times where you go back and you want to learn more, and you have something that you're like, I didn't really quite understand that. I want to know what that is. But there's never going to be a point where you're like, I don't get it. The story is always forward, and spoiler alert, I adored this comic. It was a pleasure to read, and I got through it pretty much in record time for one of these short stories because I just didn't want to put it down. I was also on a time crunch because we had to finish it before this week. And we picked it a little late. We actually committed to it a little late. We picked it a long time ago. But I was that's why we picked it, and kind of the heart behind it. But Jacob, do you want to kind of give a synopsis of the story of what happened in this comic run?
Yeah, for sure. So just going back to, Zane touched on me not having ever read DC Comics. This was literally my first ever read of a DC comic. Now, comics are something I'm newer to. I've really kind of really started to get into comic book reading really in about the last year or so. And I've kind of really kept it to mostly like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, some Marvel, and some Star Wars stuff. So this was really exciting for me to really get to delve into a world that I didn't know a whole lot about. My DC knowledge is probably very, very, very surface level. So getting to learn and really read through an entire comic book series, and not only one that was also extremely good, which, spoiler warning for me, I really did thoroughly enjoy it, but I kept thinking throughout the entire time I was reading this, knowing the knowledge that this is what James Gunn was going to be pulling for some of his DCU stuff. It had me really excited because I can just see how he's going to pull from it, and it's really going to be fun to watch that come from the page to the screen. So I'm super excited about that. But overall, I love the other thing that you said. I never felt lost a single time reading this comic book. And if you're not a comic book reader, which, like I said, I'm still very new to it, sometimes when you're reading a comic book, it is really easy to get lost because comics can really kind of flip you on your head sometimes and just cut to a completely different time frame, do all sorts of crazy stuff. This one did a really good job of when they did it. It was really easy to keep up with where they were going. So I have to give my props to that. I think the writer did a fantastic job. One of my favorite things, if you do get, me and Zane actually picked up the hardcover for this because we figured for our very first episode of Comic Corner to kind of be able to remember this moment for us, we wanted to get, the nice hardback copy. So we actually found it on sale on Amazon. It might still be on sale, so if by the end of this you guys are interested in reading it, you could probably pick it up for $25 as well. But if you open up the page of the hardcover comic, there's a little bit of like an introduction. It's the writer kind of talking about, what he was thinking when he wrote this. I really thoroughly enjoyed reading that. I thought it was really fun, really insightful for how he kind of came up with the story and stuff. But overall, fantastic book. Now, I do have some complaints about it that we'll get to towards the end of it. But overall, this is kind of a story that I didn't expect to be told not from the field of view of Supergirl. This is actually told from another character's name. I guess you would pronounce it as Ruth. Is that how you were pronouncing it when you were reading it?
I was pronouncing it Ruthie.
Okay, Ruthie. So Ruthie is, kind of like a rock farmer. She lives on this planet that really doesn't have a whole lot of contact with other life. She's very secluded area. Obviously, they have their small towns and stuff that they travel to every once in a while for certain, religious gatherings and stuff like that. But she finds out early on, she finds her father dead in a field, and she becomes obsessed with the idea of hunting down the man that killed her father. I guess unjustifiably, he does kill him in cold blood, and she becomes obsessed with the fact of doing that. So it already starts off with a really fun kind of idea, that revenge. It's kind of what fuels every story if you really boil things down. And she goes to a bar kind of, and she's looking for someone big and strong that would be willing to go and find this man that killed her father. Not finding much luck when she does stumble across Supergirl. Now, I don't want to talk on too much of this stuff. Like, obviously, we're going to be talking about some spoilers and things. But when you really read the comic, there's a lot of cool little things that you're going to really enjoy picking up on. And just kind of the heroism of Supergirl in this comic is really on full display. And she has a really cool encounter with Supergirl where she ultimately decides, I'm going to go on this adventure with you, Ruthie, and I'm going to help you avenge your father's death. And they go about it in such a really good way by the end of the entire story that I was thoroughly impressed and thoroughly enjoyed it. But that's kind of a synopsis of what this is about. It's really about a revenge story of a small town rock farmer girl who has her father killed, and she wants revenge on the man that killed her. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that kind of opening introduction to what this comic is about?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is kind of where we find Supergirl. So we find Supergirl on her 21st birthday, I believe. Is it 21st?
Yep.
Yes. And she is drinking at a planet with a red sun, and the red sun strips Kryptonians of their power. And so we find her there, kind of drowning her sorrows, kind of just dealing with being Supergirl,
Yeah.
taking this moment for herself, when she does find Ruth, and then everything that Jacob just said goes on, and she is the one that is kind of, I guess, the hired gun for Ruthie to actually allow her to travel after Krim, and really kind of see where this journey takes us. And there is a twist at the end, which I don't know how you feel. I don't know your complaints. We haven't talked about this together at all.
Yeah.
But when I read the last part of this comic, it really just it shined. And I think throughout this entire comic, I love seeing the comic from Ruth's perspective, or Ruthie's
Yes.
perspective, because that's kind of like where we see. We're giving what they're doing is they're pulling someone who we can relate to, and how we would feel in these situations if we were to interact with characters like this, and give it from someone of our perspective. And it's just narrated beautifully by her. She's incredibly intelligent. She's incredibly task driven, but she's the entire time she's just in awe of Supergirl, and it's so much fun to kind of see her character build Supergirl in her head, and then at the end we get another character build. So throughout this, it's just a complete study of the hero Supergirl, who I've read about, but I've never read one of her comics. So she's been in the comics that I've read in DC, but I've never specifically picked up a Supergirl comic. And so this was an eye-opening character study for me, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. You touched on the opening introduction, from what the author said, and immediately after reading that, and how he kind of dedicated this to his daughter and viewing it
Mhm.
through his daughter's eyes, I really was like, okay, I am going to adore this comic, and I did.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool too, this is such like it was for me as well. I had never read anything about Supergirl. I'd never seen anything about her. Obviously, I only knew she was a character just because you kind of pick up on those things when you're a nerd. You're going to hear names and stuff like that. But other than knowing she existed, I knew nothing about her. And I think if you don't know anything about this character, I don't know that you can go wrong with having this be the comic that really introduces you to a character, because it is such an awesome comic. It is so cool to see, like I touched on that opening introduction, how the author really relates this to his own daughter. And I love that he kind of picked her brain a little bit when he was having struggles, with coming up with the ideas for the way he wanted the story to go. So that was super fun, but overall, a fantastic story. One of the things, obviously I'm going to give my complaints and things, and I don't necessarily hate that they did this because I understand why they went this route. But I know for me personally, did you ever feel like Krim was kind of a very underwhelming villain when you're in the consideration of Supergirl? Like, I know what they were doing because this was really Ruth's villain, right? This was really her villain throughout the entire comic, and we really see that at the end. But did you feel like there was a lot of times you're like, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more, and obviously he's an evil dude, right? They did a really good job of showing how bad of a person he is and how willing he is to kill in cold blood. But did you ever feel like I need a little bit more of a motive to really hate this guy?
I never felt like I had needed more of a motive to hate this guy, especially as because they quickly join him up with the team of pirates, and
Yes,
so there
yes.
there is an automatic threat of world ending, just the worst of the worst people, and you really get to see that quickly. And so it's not necessarily just Krim, but we are fighting an organization that is strong enough to put dents into Supergirl. And
Hmm.
so it's not just Krim, it's Krim plus
The
Borges's
Britigans.
the Britigans. So because they add them so quickly, I never felt that. And then even at the end, the feeling of it even expounded even greater, right? Because at the end we really kind of see why your complaint may have been justified, but it was justified for a purpose. And
Mhm.
so I really enjoyed that ending, and how they kind of were like, hey, I don't know if we want to spoil it yet, but the ending point when they do realize the realization of Ruthie and Supergirl and what this journey really was, really kind of laid some better points to that, but I didn't feel like that in the moment, and I think that was a quality for me. Maybe that's just me being a little bit too enthralled in the story and not critiquing it because I'm looking at this amazing artwork and I'm getting to know a character and I'm getting to see the intelligent writing of this rock farmer and kind of just blown away that how they chose such a silly I guess setting and then having such an intellectual right because the narration is written from someone who is very well educated,
Mhm.
and so I don't know. I just was thrilled with it the whole time, so I didn't necessarily have that critique.
Yeah, I think for me, really, we'll go ahead and start talking about the actual story points that really stuck out to me. That is really the only time that it did bother me. We do get to that ending of the story where Supergirl was like, "I'm Supergirl. I could have ended this way quicker than I did." Right? I've hated the scene when Krim uses the magic orb and sends them to the other planet. That felt to me like, okay, we just gave this character a power, like a power. I guess what the word like increase his power level just for the sake of doing it, just so we can kind of get you to believe that maybe he is capable of competing with Supergirl. That's kind of where I was a little bit frustrated with it because if it wasn't for that, I think I would have been fine with it overall. Because I love the ending where Supergirl's like, "Come on, I'm Supergirl," right? I do like that because that's how we view Superman and we view Supergirl as these people that could just really fix any situation whenever they need to. That scene though felt to me like, okay, she wasn't even expecting that, even though she kind of plays off like she was. That was one of those scenes where I was like, come on now. I think we're kind of just giving him a little bit of a power trip just for the sake of doing it.
Well, and I think I personally I love that scene because the Mordru globe is what it's called.
Mhm.
Um, it takes such immense evil to create, and they talk about it. It's not a hard spell to cast, but the requirements to get to the point where you can cast it are almost unachievable unless you have been joined up with someone like the Brigadiers who are just absolute evil and you've murdered I think it said millions of people just for the
Yeah.
sake of murdering. Not like
Yep.
you have to have no other purpose. Like that is one of the requirements is you have to mass murder almost entire planets just to be able to conjure the spell. And so I think that was something that Supergirl wasn't really prepared for and it did take her by surprise and it did give a legitimate threat to something that was like okay, like even though Krim wasn't a legitimate threat to her almost at any time and she never acted like it, there was that moment where it's like, okay, like this is actually intense. And it gives us
Yep.
some of the best moments in the comic book where it does send us to that green planet, where a Kryptonian planet, a Kryptonite sun planet. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I love that. I love that they explained what it took to make that spell. And then, magic is essentially a Kryptonian's only weakness under a yellow sun. And so that I don't know. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I'm not to say I didn't like it wasn't like a huge complaint. Like I said, I'm very being nitpicky with talking about things that I wish they could have done a little differently. That was just one that I was like, I wish we would have maybe not had that necessarily just out of nowhere. And I do think they did a good job of explaining how he did achieve it and the prerequisites to get to that point. Overall though, I was absolutely thrilled with the story. Like I said, if this is your first time ever reading a Supergirl comic, I don't think you can go wrong with this one. Obviously, we have some other stuff we're going to be talking about, but then where would you rank this comic? I think we need to come up with, we need to rank it on our 1 through 10 scale like we do everything else. Tell me, do you have a ranking in your mind for where you think this comic sits for you?
Well, this is definitely the best comic we've ever rated on Comic Corner.
Yeah, it's got a high bar to hit there.
So I kind of would like. Did you ever watch the show Top Gear?
Yes, and we kind of keep like a running thing of yeah, I know what you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about.
So I'm gonna start with a Comic Corner. We're gonna have our ranking. So this will be number one for me, on Comic Corner. Um, but as far as like just reading a comic, honestly, I haven't had a comic do as good of a character study as
Hmm.
this one did in any of them. Now I've had better character moments. I've had better storylines, better interwoven signs. The art in this is beautiful, but it also isn't as poppy
Mhm.
And so like fly off the page wow you as some others that I've read. And so it's definitely amazing, and there's no hate on the artwork at all. This is my favorite style of artwork, the newish style, digital looking art. Um, but I will say, like, as far as like visuals, I would say it's probably an 8 out of 10 for comics for me.
Okay.
Storyline, I can't hate on anything about it. I don't know. I couldn't think of a better uh I guess character arc or character study for me. So this is up there with some of the greatest I've read.
Yeah, I think it's really going to be tough for, whatever. We haven't even decided what we're going to pick next. And maybe that's something we need to work on in the future is to get you guys excited for the next comic we're going to read. However, I do think it is going to be hard to dethrone this for a while. I think it did such a good job with so many things and just purely getting me excited for the future of DC. If that wasn't enough, the story was absolutely fantastic. I will also touch on the artwork. They definitely went, like you said, with I feel like a more elegant type of art style and not that really like pow wham crack, style of comic that I really do like. So I will say it's not my favorite art style. And again, that is not hating on the art style because I think it is absolutely fantastic. I think the artist really did a good job for what this comic book is. The art matches it perfectly. So that's not a knock on it. It's not my personal favorite style of art. The story is second to none for a lot of comics for me. Obviously, it's the only DC comic I've ever read. So obviously, it's the best DC comic I've ever read. But like I just said, I think it's going to be hard to dethrone this with whatever comic we decide to do next. If we go Marvel, if we go Star Wars, if we go Ninja Turtles, if we go off something completely different, it's going to be really hard to top the story that this was able to accomplish in just an 8 series run. So I think all those things speak volume to this. If you've been on the fence about trying to find a new comic to read, I don't think I could recommend this anymore to anybody. This is an absolutely fantastic read.
Yeah. And I think the value system that's put forth, so many times we get to see flawed characters do flawed things, or perfect people do, continue to be perfect. And I think that's one of the superhero tropes, right? Is that he's just the best of the best. You hate Captain America because he's just such a goody good. And he always does goody good. But this is a flawed character who has real pain, and the pain is shown, but still chooses to do good at every
Mhm.
step. And that choice to do good, because none of us are the goody good. We're all flawed, sinful creatures, and we have the opportunity to say or to choose to do the right thing or choose to do good. And I think it's more relatable at that moment when you do experience pain, you are suffering, but yet you still choose to do what's right, because that's what you're supposed to do. So I love that fact that this is more of a aspiration than someone like Superman or Captain America is, where you really just can't live up to it. This
Mhm.
is someone who is deeply flawed and hurt and pained and has had a very challenging go of it, and then always living in Superman's shadow. And I love almost everything they did to compare to her every time he was mentioned, and how she reacted to him and how others in the galaxy reacted to her because of him. And
Mhm.
so I really enjoyed this. So it's definitely up there.
Yeah, it was so good. I love so many aspects of it. Super exciting to continue to read more in just the DC universe. And I gotta say, I'm really interested in this character now. So I'm gonna be obviously on the lookout for some more comics, just for my own personal reading. I think even if we don't decide to do another, I don't think we're gonna do another Supergirl comic just to go back to back like that. I think we want to keep it fresh and try new things and stuff. But I think just for a personal reader, I think she has become one of my favorite superhero characters really in all of superhero fandom, because this book did such a good job of, like you said, making her relatable, making her kind of always choosing to do the right thing even though she does have so many struggles. And you touched on the Superman and the Captain America thing. It felt like they never did anything wrong, and they were always just perfect. They're always doing the right thing, always never mess up. She's messed up, and she's doing things that she shouldn't be doing, but at the end of the day she is ultimately choosing to do what's best. And I think that just speaks so much volume to the character. I'm sitting here, I'm sure you got your copy right in front of you right now. But if you look on the one side, the front side of the comic, you see her all bloody, tattered up. If you have the deluxe edition like we do, with the sword in the sand, that picture right there does such a good job of just kind of showing her as what type of character she is. She's dealing with grief right there in the scene. She's going through her mind, as she talks about a lot. She's always thinking about what happened to her home planet that was destroyed, but ultimately she's still making an effort to do what's best and trying to help others. So I think that picture right there really does a lot for saying what this comic does. So
Yeah.
one of the things we did want to touch on a little bit, though, was talk about the comic a little bit like we just did, but we also wanted to talk about some few things that we really enjoyed. So we both came up with our favorite art panel from the comic, our favorite line from the comic, and then maybe our favorite story setting, like a section of the story, kind of like a moment that happened. So Zane, is there one that you want to pick off with right off the bat, or do you want to kind of work down the list?
Yeah, so we can kind of just go right down the list, panel, moment, exposition,
Okay.
slash line. So do you want me to start off with my favorite panel?
Yeah, absolutely. Give us your favorite panel, because I think this one, even though we said we didn't love the art, it did still have some really cool panels in it.
So I did love the art. It's just not my favorite.
Mhm.
So, this is my favorite style of art. I do love a little bit more Green Lantern because you can do some more fascinating visuals with the Green Lantern just because of the subject matter. But
Yeah.
as far as like this digital art style, this is my preferred style. I do not like the PAL old style that you like. The golden age of comics to me can be stay back there. I'm very happy with modern comics.
Uh,
So I know that's a hot take. I know a lot of people love those, but I'm not an oldie. I'm not a golden age comic fan. Um, but yeah, my favorite comic. So there's one that I thought was going to be mine, and that was kind of when Red Supergirl took the red kryptonite pill, and she was
okay.
fighting the Capan dragon. And so
Yes,
like
yes.
that was like one of the ones that I was thinking of, and I was like, man, that one really stood out. That's exactly what I like. That's like the perfect art style. Um, but however, there's one art panel, and I didn't want to cheat and pick like two pages of panels
Oh,
together.
and
I wanted one specific panel to pick
okay.
from. Go ahead.
And feel free to give some honorable mentions. Obviously, we're going to pick one that was our favorite, but I do have some that I wanted to talk about a couple of panels. So if you have a few, I'd love to hear the few that you did pick.
Okay. Well, so that one was my runner up would be the red
Okay.
Kryptonian. But however, the panel I picked for my favorite was when after she has seen the devastation of the planet that they are going to the first planet they get with the destruction of Krim, and
Okay.
she helps bury those people, and then she's
Yeah.
dealing with the pain, and she flies to the sun, and she curls up in a ball, and she cries.
Hmm.
That panel for me was just stunning. I thought it was awesome, and I thought it did such a good job with showing the emotion, and there's not a lot of color there. There's not a lot of color, there's not a lot of fascination, but you can really see what she's dealing with, and she is just trying to feel something, trying to get away because she knows that if she expressed her feelings where she was currently at, she would destroy the entire world. And so she literally flies into the sun and just to a place where she can feel and she can express. And I thought that comic panel did such wonders for that character, and there was such emotion and such heart behind it because of what she had just experienced and how many things she had just gone through. She'd just seen the worst of the atrocities that Krim had to bear. She had to deal with it, had to deal with the prisoner that they just stoned to death because he was unforgiving of what he did. He was happy with what he did. He even at the rate of facing death, he was saying there like, "Hey, I had a lot of fun," and
Hmm.
literally killed half of that planet. And so I don't know. That panel to me just stood out, and it is such a good artwork and how to display. And I'm just thinking about like how would I draw the sun with Supergirl in it, and the challenge to get that to page. I'm always fascinated with. I love to draw. I thought at one time I was going to be a graphic artist, and so this is something that I thoroughly enjoy. So that panel for me was number one.
Yeah, and again, there were some really cool panels in here, so I love that one. I think those full page panels always really catch your eye because obviously it's a whole page, right? So it's a
Well,
lot
and
of
this
fun to
this
see
one's
those.
just a third of page.
Yeah, that was kind of broken up into three little panels there, which I really liked. That one was super cool. So I had a couple. It was really hard for me to pick one, but I think the one that I'm going to say was my favorite in the panel was actually in the final chapter, and it's when Supergirl returns back to Ruth, where she has Krim tied up after she has fought the Brigands by herself, and she has her horse, who we found out was then was a cursed kryptonite
Mm,
or crypt, and she's holding him in his hands. I love that panel. I love the rag tattered cape that she has on because she's just taken a beating. The horse has come and saved her, which he ends up dying, and we find out that he was really a similar kind to her. I love that. I thought that was such a cool panel. It's just got so much detail. I love all the blood splatter. I think they did a really good job there. That was probably my favorite one, but definitely my runner up, I would say, is, I talked about this not really necessarily being one of my favorite parts of the comic, but we're talking about what was the name of the magic orb? Again,
oh, the Mordru globe.
yes, the globe. There is the scene, it's at the very end of that chapter where she is running from the globe, and we get like really kind of like, it's like basically a 2-page art thing, but they do break it up into a bunch of different panels. But the page on the right where she has finally ran through it and we see the whole bunch of different colors, and then the page fades to black and white. I absolutely love that panel. I think it is so cool looking, and I think that might be more your style. That panel comic was a little bit, because there's a lot of color, there's a lot more like stuff going on. I really, really like that page.
Yeah, that if we want to just go ahead and slip into it, we're gonna slip favorite moment, right? And we're gonna go
Okay.
into favorite exposition because that was my favorite exposition. The more Drew globe chase that she's seen, honestly, that entire thing was exposition. So you get to see her thoughtful planning and then that chase scene. I thought the art in that entire scene was brilliant from the get go, from the 2-page horse continuation single panel to the eight panel slipping into the void outside of reality, essentially at the edge of the universe where magic doesn't work. That entire exposition talking about her resilience and how Supergirl never gave up. That was my favorite. How when everyone else gave up hope and how everyone else would have given up, she never did. That was my favorite exposition. And I
So my
think
favorite.
because
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no one talks but Ruth in that scene. Essentially, and from the beginning to the end, it's just the exposition of Ruth about Supergirl's homeworld destruction and just the character of Supergirl. And I think that's episode. Is that 6? Is that
Yes,
comic
chapter 6.
chapter 6? What a highlight! Standalone episode, honestly, or
I believe
standalone
it's.
thing. You would not have to
Ooh.
read anything else in order to enjoy that. And that one was fantastic.
Yes. You touched on it right. I was about to say my favorite part of that was the fact that it was just Ruth talking. I thought that was so cool. Really kind of, again, it was kind of seeing her just kind of break down things in such a good way that you can really tell she's a very educated person. And I really liked that throughout the comic. It didn't feel like she was ever stumbling across her words. She's very really in tune with what she wanted to say. That was definitely a really cool scene. I think my favorite exposition, you touched on it a little bit. Mine was chapter 4, and this is where I really felt like the writer was kind of flexing a little bit. He's kind of showing off his writing skills, and we touched on it. You touched on where she flies around and helps dig all the graves. I really liked the exposition right before that, where she's talking to those aliens, and he keeps talking. The one alien keeps talking about her, his friend Flarg, right? And he keeps kind of
Oh yeah.
repeating himself. I thought that was so good, though, because it made me feel for that alien, right? I felt for them because they were like, he kept thinking about the. I keep stuttering because I'm like, I have so much I want to say. The scene though where they talk about how he couldn't tell anymore if Flarg was screaming or if it was his screams from the agony and pain
Yes.
they were going through. That's where I was like, holy cow! Like that writing to me is some of the best writing I've ever read in a comic. And I feel like we've said a lot of really great things about this comic, but it is really that good. And I think that's why it speaks volumes why James Gunn is selecting it as kind of one of his things he wants to build the DCU off of and really reference it a lot. That was so good to me, just reading through that. And, he's talking about how he couldn't tell if he was the one screaming anymore and how he was kind of surprised that Flarg even had that in him because Flarg was a really soft spoken person. And it really kind of just shows when you're at death's door like that in pain and suffering, a lot. You'll find out a lot about somebody that you may never have known. And he talks about throughout his whole life, Flarg was soft spoken, and he thought it was funny that he was able to yell as loud as he was, even in that moment. So that was my favorite exposition. A little bit of a darker moment, not really something that ends up being for the good. But I was just like, wow, that was some really good writing. So I got to say that's probably my favorite, moment slash exposition throughout this comic.
Yeah. Okay, so you kind of can. So that's your favorite moment and exposition. Do you have
Yeah,
another favorite moment?
I think that's kind of I really like both of those. If I had to pick another like moment, that's my favorite exposition. If I had to pick a moment, it was definitely on the planet with the green sun, where you talked on a little bit, where they're there with the creatures and stuff like that, and how Supergirl is in lots of pain. I really loved reading through that because that's where it felt like Supergirl was genuinely weak. And really, there was cause for concern, and I felt like that's where we really see Ruth's character start to evolve. So I think that
Yeah.
would probably be my favorite moment, and the other one would probably be my favorite exposition.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was really fun there. Her slander towards Superman 45 minutes. And then
The Justice League saves
yeah,
him.
the Justice League saves him, pathetic. And she had to go a full day in the sun, in the Kryptonian sun or Kryptonite sun. So I agree that was and I don't think I've said anything but positive for this, but for my favorite moment was the culmination of the book. And I think a lot of times you can kind of overlook favorite moments within something when there is something so good at the end. And it was at the moment when Supergirl admits that it was all a front and that
Mhm.
the whole thing was in order to, it was a gimmick. And that it was for Ruthie's good that she went on this journey and that she just wanted to teach her that killing was wrong and that vengeance was wrong and that I guess it was all for naught. And then Ruth takes that moment and she just says, I learned it. And dude, I thought that moment was so good, especially after the emotion of her trying to kill Krim and she can't,
Mhm.
and going through that moment without Supergirl, because Supergirl wasn't there for that.
Yeah.
She didn't see that. And then to get a really defeated Supergirl who did just lose Cosmos, who did just lose this Kryptonian who loved her, who was cursed to be a horse, and then taking the brutal beating that she did and having to beat those guys and send them on the run and then coming down to Earth and the realization that it was all worth it and that this one rock farmer learned the lesson that vengeance is bad and that killing is wrong, regardless of the situation, to take it into your own hands. And I thought that was cool. That was my favorite moment, the culmination of the entire eight part series. Such emotion in those panels, such emotion in those lines, and then even Supergirl having a moment of weakness, kind of giving up because of what she has just endured.
Mhm.
However, Ruth then being able to reaffirm what she has been taught and what she's learned, observing and seeing Supergirl's character over the last I don't know, few weeks of journeying with her, and then kind of a little flashback segments of every time that Supergirl showed her humanity and showed her
Yeah.
compassion
Yeah.
and her love and what she was really like Mr. Miyagi Ruthie the entire time. And I really that moment for me was just so good. I think sometimes I can overlook like the true meaning of the thing and be like, this moment was cooler. However, in this one, that one just shouted at me like, wow, what an amazing ending to a comic run and really tying it all together um, so well, better than most any other ones ever have for me. Comic runs for me don't generally wrap up with this um, like aha moment or like look at this masterpiece we just wrote and what this last line did to really show the culmination of it. And so for me, that was definitely my top moment.
Well, and it's cool too just to realize that Supergirl, who is mentioned many times, saves planets, took the time, and it was not a short period of time. They talk about how long it took them for them to get to that point. She took the time to really take Ruth down that path to show her how important it was for even just one person to get the idea that killing and revenge isn't always okay. And I thought that was one of the cool things that really stood out to me was she took all this time, took all the heartache, the pain, the suffering, just to prove to Ruth that it was okay to move on and turn the other head. Which then you kind of see at the very end, Ruth does get her revenge, but nonetheless, I thought that was really cool, really great overall. So yeah, no, I think that's a really great moment to have. Absolutely loved that part of it. Now, do you have just a one line in the comic that really stood out to you?
I don't really have a one line. This wasn't really like a one liner heavy book.
hmm It was
Because it
larger
was
exposition for sure.
larger exposition, so I really didn't have anything that was like I guess the aha kind of like one line moment. I can't think of it. I didn't write that down offhand. Um, what was with the chase scene? Um, when she's talking about the void at the end of the universe, and and she was like, magic is a tricky thing. It's tricky for me sometimes. But I know this much. At least what works back there doesn't necessarily work here. And I thought that
Mhm.
was a really cool line. Just kind of like the current trope that you have no power here. But kind of Supergirl talking to herself uh, at the edge of the universe where magic doesn't work. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think this, like you said, I didn't really pick up on a whole lot of one lines. One line that was just funny to me, and I just like the reference to the Superman kind of was they say that, and we flew off up and away. And I was like, oh, up and away. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that they did throw in some of those little one liners and stuff like that. But I have to agree with you. I think this was definitely a very heavier, large exposition. I think this was for sure out of all the comics that I have read, this had a lot more actual reading in it than I think a majority of the comics I've read was, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I like actually having something to read and stuff. I'm flipping through the book now, and there's so many panels where there's just a lot of exposition in it, and it's just all Ruthie talking about things and stuff like that, which I thought was overall really great. So that's kind of our review of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow for our inaugural debut of Comic Corner. I absolutely had a blast with this, and I'm really excited to kind of do our new rating scale that Zane came up with, kind of referencing Top Gear. That's going to be really fun, kind of overall, to see when we get through all these comics. One day we're going to be able to look back and really see where we have them all ranked, not just off of a number, but where we really put them head to head against other comics. So that's going to be really fun. Zane, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on with this comic before we wrap this up?
No, guys, this was definitely a longer one. And the introduction of Comic Corner, I think it was definitely worthy of giving such uh, a long introduction review of our first comic, and such a joy it was. So, but I do want to just say thank you guys for those of you that listened, tuned in, and have given suggestions, critiques, commented on it, and really communicated and really kind of uplifted the community here for us. Just thank you guys for listening and being a part of it. It's been a pleasure, and I've absolutely loved doing it. It's been such a joy, and I can't wait to keep doing it with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a blast. Again, we just want to thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. Like Zane just said, it's really been an awesome, and we're super excited for the future. I mean, here's to another year. I don't think we have any plans of stopping in the future. If anything, I think we're going to really start to pick up the pace as we've really got some fun things to talk about. Obviously, we have the new Comic Corner segment. Obviously, we have our monthly breakdowns at the beginning of every month. This is going to be something you guys can look forward to at the end of every month. So you guys kind of have a beginning and end. And in those middle episodes throughout the month, we'll just have some fun and talking about breakdowns and things like that overall. But that's going to be this episode. That is our 1 year anniversary episode in the books. But real quick, if you guys have any comics or anything that you guys would recommend to us, try to keep it on that shorter side of things. We like those 8 series mini runs like that. That was a lot more fun to read than really committing a lot of time and money to something bigger. Let us know for sure if there's something you guys think we would really enjoy. If this is something you guys have already read, let us know what you guys thought about it, and let us know if maybe we encourage you all to give it a shot, because I think this is definitely one worth trying. But again, we do just want to thank you all for all the support that you've given us throughout this past year. It's been an absolute blast, and I'm super excited to continue it. But that is going to do it for the 1 year anniversary episode. Again, if you guys know anybody that hasn't checked out the podcast, make sure to let them know, and also give us a rating. We really do appreciate it. Tell a friend, rate the podcast, and just continue to come back each and every week, because we really do appreciate it. But that's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.